You are listening to The Only Constant, a podcast where we go beyond the usual discussions in technology and business and aim to explore more than explain. Join me for engaging discussions with a diverse range of global thought leaders as we seek to uncover new perspectives and insights in a free flowing conversation. My guest today is Doug Shannon, and I am your host, Lasse Rindom. Hi, Doug, and thank you for joining me on The Only Constant today.
Hey, well, thanks for having me, and it's gonna be great. We're gonna have an interesting conversation.
Yeah, you simply have to be one of the most industrious people I know. Currently in West Coast US, right? I know you are very early to do this recording.
Yeah, right now I'm in California, and it's 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, I just want to make sure to acknowledge that, and also perhaps excuse you to our listeners if you might sound tired at some point, right? You've been up early to just get ready for this recording. I'm really appreciate that. That's what I want to say.
Yeah,
So, Doug, we've both lived through the IPA hype and survived it. uh, or working in it, working with it, getting value from, getting to a value point. This also
yep,
means that I think we have a nose for over exaggerations, right? So we've tried this before. I remember crazy statements earlier in RPA marketing. So
right.
what generative AI messaging is the most overhyped and will fall flat? Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, definitely living through, just like you said, like going through the motions of RPA all the way to automation, intelligent automation, and then now we're in this generative AI giant. It's not a bubble, but it's definitely it's the new world. It's the nuance, it's the understanding. It's interesting because it's moving so fast because even as of last year, just the amount of innovation that's happened is crazy fast. So even those that are us that are knowledge leaders and people that are putting stuff out there, it's hard to keep up. And part of what helps me to keep up is just posting and putting things out and then doing just tons of research, on and off the even before I go to sleep and before I wake up or
Yeah.
even early like it is now, right? So with the what's the hype, right? So the hype is that I think the biggest thing is companies right now, especially enterprises, are looking at how to bring this in, and what they're finding out is their biggest question is how. How do we do it? The the information is out there saying how good it's going to be and why they need to bring it in. And if they don't bring it in, then somebody else brings it in. Then now there's a competition,
Hmm.
but nobody's answered the how very well.
I just spoke to a company today actually that said that they've had just some McKinsey consultants in to do some blah blah heat mapping because they they didn't dare fall behind. The reality is that no one's really falling behind because no one's really leading the pack. I think sometimes.
Yeah, right. That's true because I've talked to many in the space, and although I'm even doing my own uh, work on the same subject and doing pilots and driving things and seeing some value, although like if you talk to many other companies, they haven't even got off the ground, or if you talk to even Microsoft, they're out there trying to push and getting a lot of information, and they have a lot of great teams that are doing this, but they just spun up most of their teams as of like kind of late of last year.
Mm.
So to be able to get on with them and get through the information, and then really once you dial this all in, I think one thing we could talk about later too is the fact that, especially in the RPA and the automation space, a lot of the people that came into that, and this is something I've noticed recently, is that those people that are in the space that are driving it are mostly like a BA background. They're mostly business people that understand processes and they're driving it because they were the SME at some point. They were the domain expert. The problem is with Gen AI, there's a ton of technological, items and indexers and different ways it works and chunking the data and understanding how the data works. And not the average business person understands that.
But still, I think that what we've seen is that generative AI solutions are like extremely simple to build actually, and you can also have them help you build it. It's not that
So
difficult to do RAG. If you go to Azure, right, you have cognitive search functions just built directly into the Azure AI platform.
right, like it in some cases it can seem simple from just like using OpenAI and doing searching and doing basic understanding and asking it questions and whatnot, or even building some of the new GPTs and then processing like a PDF to have it, understand where the grounding is, right? So you can get better grounding, so then you can limit the hallucinations. But when you come into the enterprise and you have to build in that cognitive search, and every time you build in a cognitive search or a Cosmos DB or something, there's a cost to it. So then
Mm,
the issue is then not just how do we do it, it's how much does it cost?
yeah.
And then even doing these pilots, they're like, well, how much does it cost? Well, each model has a different price, but then each one, even though it's like 2 cents on the dollar, it's still how much is it going to cost? And then over time, if you're going to use a process like an LLM and you're going to drive a certain aspect of that, if you run it 1,000 times, then, in a day, like what's your cost? So that's what things you have to look at. And this is why, also I'm bringing in automation to where the way that I'm doing my pilots right now is I have automation actually running like the long pin to the pole, like the long issues, the long pulls, the knowledge grounding information that I'm pulling down, the 10,000 different, articles or 10,000 different,
Mm.
knowledge points. That's being done by automation. Because what's the point of using an LLM and having it, spend token, dollars on something that can be done with automation? It's already set. It's already paid for. It's already amortized.
Yeah, but you're touching upon some of the issues here, right? That I completely agree that and we'll get back to that RPA, generative AI works best in sort of conjunction with other tools, right? And it's also
Mhm.
the issue
Yep.
is sort of like in the old days, how do we deploy it? How do we maintain it? How do we ensure user access rights and inheritance and stuff like that? Um, but the core tech for someone, especially someone in IT like you, is quite simple to work with. I think still the pricing is a thing, right? Obviously, but it's still quite simple to work with for someone like you. Whereas maybe a business user might find it a little bit more difficult. I still think that it's not that much more difficult than RPA because RPA really broke a lot. RPA is being driven by business
Yeah.
analysts. I think that's also crazy thing. If from the RPA I've seen, right? There's a lot of things to consider.
Yeah.
But this is not going to be about RPA because that's going to take us down a rabbit hole. I think
Yeah.
I don't want to discuss that. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I mean, when you look at it, it's it's simple at first. Even I came into it, and now that I'm, like, deeper into it and looking at the amount of infrastructure needs to go on the back end to ensure that, are we mitigating hallucinations? How are we doing that? Okay, we have grounding. This grounding points to things. Now we actually have information that tells LLM, where am I getting my source from? What's the source of truth, right? And so you
mm,
drag that in, and then you go, well, where does this output? So this the reason why it kind of so Gen AI should sit in the COE, right, in the center of excellence and the center of enablement, because those areas are already used to processes. Those areas are already used to understanding the upstream and downstream. And so
mm.
when you're building in an LLM and you're bringing this as part of your core technologies or part of your technologies that works around your core technologies, it's a matter of where's it going, how's it going to get there, what's it going to do once it gets there, and who's touching this? Because this is the other thing that I'm doing is I'm not allowing or working with users where they can actually touch the LLMs that are actually doing business functions. So I have the automation side actually prompting the LLM to do what I need it to
Oh, so
do.
so many questions here, Doc. So you're not going
Right.
autonomous with this. You don't believe in the autonomous hype?
In the autonomous, well, I actually believe, and I'm trying to work towards the autonomous enterprise. So
Mm,
that's where I'm going, because with AI agents and autonomous agents, and the fact that we can actually do some of these things like GPTs, and that's coming more along the lines of things. There's going to be eventually someone building out, and there's some teams already doing this actually, but building out the autonomous agents that are actually being orchestrated, kind of like automation, but doing so much more and has grounding built
yeah, but it
into it.
seems like that. My point is, it seems like you are embedding the generative AI decision making into something that's a really restrict framework where it can't go crazy, right? You don't trust it. So who's going to make the decisions in your autonomous enterprise, right? You don't. It sounds like you don't believe in it.
Nope. So I do believe in the autonomous enterprise. I don't trust generative AI to the point of, because of the fact that it has the ability to be hypnotized and prompt injected, right? So in general, you have to control that
I agree.
side. The reason why
Yeah.
automation did so well, right? The reason why companies said, "Hey, this is great," is because it has audit controls. The reason why you can actually tie it to core systems is because it has auto controls. So I trust things that are on Rails that are controlled because then the humans that are in the loop can say, "Oh, I know what it's going to do. And if it can't do it, it's not going to do it, or it's going to tell me it can't do it." Now, when you have something like a program or an operating system or an interface like Gen AI is, this interface can go much beyond the if then else. It can you know pseudo think and knows how to do different things, or off of the programming that it understands, it can keep
Yeah.
going. That's what you have to be. You have to say, okay, do we want it to do that? And if we do, I want to know where it's going. I want to know why it thought what it thought, or why it went the way it went, because that's if you don't know that, then you can't audit it. But if the way that I'm building, and this is what I call AI spanning, which is also part of where I see the autonomous enterprise going, is that you have, back in the past in automation world, we said, hey, we want human in loop activities. Great. Well,
Mm.
instead of human in a loop, why can't we just take the human out of the loop and have the LLM do that? Well, you can, and that's what I'm kind of working on right now. And what that looks like is you have a process that gets kicked off by a user. That user then says, I have a question. It actually, the automation goes to the LLM, asks the question, gets more information back, but it's all within the automation process at this point. And then once that information is back, it provides that to the automation. The automation says, great, I have this information. I'm going to now run this and go grab all this data, 10,000 different, nuanced data, bring this in, put it into a data blob in Azure or whatnot. And then that data blob can then be searched by the LLM. The LLM can then do a summary of that data blob, then create a summary, and then also store that in a data blob. At which point, and then the data blobs are your terms for like data locations that are being stored. So out of those two locations, you have your source data, like your knowledge base, and then you have your summarized data, and then you vectorize those, right? Once you have them vectorized, you can search it. You can do advanced search. You can do
Yeah,
cognitive
but yeah, but yeah,
search.
yeah, but you're back to someone searching it, right? So you have the
Yeah,
human searching it still. It's a human asking for it. The problem is that generative AI becomes a microservice to some extent, right? In your
it can.
toolbox, it's not. But the problem is that the open AI agenda is to make agents that can do anything for you, just whatever, right?
Yeah, I mean, right in the beginning, right, like right now, we're seeing agents come up, and agents are interesting and they're great, but they're handling roles and they're handling certain permissions and certain jobs. So and not like jobs, but they're handling certain like aspects of a job. So you can go build one that looks to build you some kind of nuanced form of Visio charts. Like how do I have a process I want it to look like this, build me a Visio for
Mm.
that. Or I have an idea over here and I need to track these meetings and if I didn't have a coordinator, maybe a GPT can actually be one of those coordinators that actually helps drive it or drives information. I have a lot of theories on kind of where that's going. I think I did a post on where basically the future of where I see some of this going, right? Just for the listeners is essentially like if you look at like Star Trek, right? Like all of us, technology has been going down a path of sci-fi for a while. We always try to meet that creativity that we all have in our minds. And so when you have something like Star Trek and you have, the comm badge and they hit their comm badge on their chest and they say, hey, I need to do these things or this is what I want. Well, the first thing that GPT or that LLM or that AI is looking at, because it's an interface, it's saying, who's this role? Oh, you're the captain of the Enterprise. Great. Well, what do we have helping you? We have different GPTs, different autonomous agents automatically assisting you in the back end. So the captain, being his role being captain, has different permissions, is saying, I need to do these things. Well, it has language translation, it has threat matrices, like to understand like what is going on, what's multimodality, like what does it look, what is the
But
captain
but
seeing
but
now?
the key point here is that my key problem with that is that, and I get the Star Trek idea completely, but
Sure.
the key point is that um, would you trust it with your credit card, right? I wouldn't.
I think a lot of people that bought the Rabbit R1 are exactly doing that because they just sold 10,000 of them in like 40 minutes or something like that.
Mm.
So they're storing a lot of information. So I think the biggest thing is don't trust anything at this point. The cybersecurity like war essentially that's going on right now is nuts because nothing is trusted.
Yeah,
I
because
think we're seeing
that's the other mega trend, right? Automation, AI, one mega trend. The other one is cybersecurity and data
yeah,
privacy
yeah,
and stuff like that. And having an AI that one thing has unlimited access to everything, including your credit cards. and can be jailbreaked. You can cheat it, you can manipulate it easily,
Yeah,
quite easily actually. And then also that's for malevolent actors one who wants to break in, hack into your agent and use it in the wrong way. But
right,
also just you having an AI that might have some inherited user rights that are way above what you were allowed to have in a company. That's the other aspect, right? And I know that's
right.
something that companies are thinking a lot about. I also know that's something that's been posed to Microsoft for the Copilot, and Microsoft's like, "Nah, we don't want to talk about that because here's a capability we don't care," right? But
Yeah. No. I mean, there's a lot to go into that, right? Because a lot of companies, well, this is a classic IT issue, right? You have users that have too much
yeah,
rights. You have bots
and
that
you,
have
and
too
you,
much rights.
and you come from an IT background, I know,
Right,
used to be a little bit more skeptical. You become an optimist. I had Dr. Jeffrey
right.
Funk on a month ago, where he came from being an optimist to being a pessimist. So, so I'm just asking,
I
all
get it.
this,
Yeah,
all the things I'm talking about here, right?
yeah,
About the user inheritance right and application interface, all these things where you need to build it into.
right.
Still, you're an optimist on we can go autonomous with this. I'm just curious.
It's a different mindset, right? I mean, it's not just like a growth mindset and the classic stuff you hear about. It's just like and it's not the art of the possible that you hear about because like 'cause some of these things are just like overdrawn and oversaid.
Mm,
The thing is like working, yeah, coming from an IT background of 20 plus years and then doing everything from help desk to, design level of operating systems and everything from all the different roles and jobs I've had and seeing how again like how you have like one login to handle your user stuff and you have another login for your admin stuff or whatnot. The business world doesn't really understand that. The only business world that understands kind of dual logins are your government systems that have, either SIPR or NIPR,
mm.
like secure and non-secure sites. So those civilians understand that, and I come from that background too, to see like what can be done. And I think that we're seeing like 0 day cybersecurity stuff. We're seeing like how do people sign in. I think in the future we're definitely need to look at like how we sign in differently and Gen AI has that capability. So I believe very much in use the capabilities, but think with like kind of like I think differently. I think than some. This is why when I post like people listen. I don't know, but in general, there's a lot of ways to solve for many different things, whether it's right or wrong. But we should use our creativity and figure out how to do it. That's kind of the fun
But I
part.
get
So
the point, right?
hopefully,
So the autonomous enterprise is sort of like a leading star, or a guiding star, north star, whatever, something we aim
sure.
for, right? I get that point. It's just it just seems sometimes to be. Um, I'm just conflicted myself, also with an automation background. Is that
Mhm.
we are both seeing the world become even more intertwined and open and connected. That's the idea here, right? And also the open AI idea, saying like, oh, we'll just take all the copyright. Oh, why does people want copyright? And then on the other hand, seeing the cybersecurity issues, the that where you're closing down the world a little bit more, and also the, the OpenAI copyright thing is actually also an argument for saying,
Um,
okay, let's close off our content even more to
right.
each other than we did before. So we're seeing both trends, right? So are you just choosing one optimist lane, or are you just have what's your
No.
reflection on this?
Yeah, so I reflect a lot on a lot of that. So I
Hmm.
think the funny thing is that our global world, I mean, we come from different sides of the world right now, right? And so, but our
Hmm.
global world, we see the same issues kind of that we're seeing in the business world. So we see a business world that is finally catching up to the global markets and saying, "Hey, we're out there, we're interconnected." But then as we do that, as everyone starts to see this massive globally connected network, we see the global world kind of freak out and have a little bit of turmoil here and there because it pushes back, because culture pushes back, people push back because they don't understand. And the fact is, we're moving so fast now that I think we're definitely going to see more pushback. We're going to see more people not understanding, and if we don't find a way to get them as part of this change, as part of this new part of history that we're moving into, we're going to see more pushback on both the business and we're going to see more pushback on a global scale to say, what are we doing? What are our boundaries? What are the boundaries of our business? What are the boundaries of our countries? And how does that relate?
We're also moving
If
into maybe an age where politicians are going to be a little bit more fluently in digital terms, right, and know what cybersecurity is all about. Data privacy is. If you look at the
we hope.
GDPR thing, yeah, but you go by 15 years, you had the open web as well, and you had all the social media platforms exploding and just exploiting
Yeah,
I mean that in, I think, the worst way, exploiting
yeah.
people's privacy and data, right? And we're sort of closing that down a little bit. But now everyone's like, oh, but we shouldn't close it down because of AI. We need to be, on top of China and everything. I think we should be very careful. We're not saying that,
Yeah.
not comparing ourselves to autocratic regimes that don't care about privacy or intellectual property rights, and then say, hey, they have their own censorship issues, especially around AI, where they have inhibitions, right? We should be happy that we have a liberal market.
We should I mean, a market is better than anything, right? A market means that people are communicating, and that's really
Yeah,
where Gen AI does help right now is because even the people that I've worked with and done mentorships with or talked to people or the many people I've talked overseas, the Gen AI helps bring down those it actually helps people be less biased, I think, and it also helps people to actually communicate much better than what they would normally do because
mm,
maybe you missed something or maybe you don't understand the cultural aspect of someone else's,
yeah.
background, but you kinda meet in the middle. So there's a language of help there, and it's an enabler, right? It's a total enabler. It totally helps drive that. But by enabling, it's also like it's also in the sense of like not enabling because the people that aren't looking at it now aren't being enabled. So then if you have a whole group of people that are taking this on and they've already jumped the chasm and they're saying, hey, this is great, we're going to use it, we're going to be enabled and use it as an enabler, fantastic. But then what's the rest of the people doing? And then
Mm.
that's where you still have like that subset of like people saying like, I don't know, like a quote that I wrote recently, which kind of resonates here, that may help out with the idea of like kind of where I'm thinking is that. So the quote is: "In the pursuit of progress, uh, if innovation becomes a wellspring of proposed power, it will be met with a race of supremacy." So Gen AI is proposed power, right? Businesses are looking for this. Businesses are saying, if I don't have this power, I am not going to be with it. I am not going to be able to be integrated. I'm not going to be able to like drive sales or beat out my competition. So
Mm.
there's power there, and if there's power there, people are going to strive to gain it and do anything to get it. And that's where we have the issue because again, the business side of what we're talking to does mimic a lot of the world scale of things too.
But it's also driven by the power of the big tech firms that are growing even bigger on this, and there is also, it seems that there is, as we
Yeah,
mentioned before, just some political backlash on that, a little bit of pushback on us from culture, saying that maybe we shouldn't just. But that's, of course, that's maybe a different conversation. I just think that it's interesting that we sort of discovered here sort of two different um, aspects to it, right? But
dynamics and yeah.
both. I believe that the world will become Star Trek, and also the maybe the old Doug saying that, nah, cybersecurity,
Well, I mean,
use
I
inheritance
kinda
rights. Right?
I mean, there is a thing there, like, I kinda hope it becomes the United Federation of Planets. Like, it'd be great if we had, like, one banner as a world and said, "Hey, we're one blue ball in space, and we're all human, and we're really not that different when you break it down." Like,
Yeah.
even when, looking at the bodies exhibit that they had where they showed, like, the humans and how they, like, take the skin off and everybody's the same. We're all same. Like, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. So, like, why do we have to, have issues there.
But,
On
but
the
Doug, just I just want to get back to one thing you said in the beginning, right? You said this is not a bubble. You said it looks like a bubble, but it's not a bubble. You said it's not a bubble. I'd like
right.
to
I
let
don't think it's a
you
bubble.
with one small thing that took up my mind during the launch of the GPT store. Was it last week
Right?
or week before? Uh,
Friday, I
but
think, actually,
yeah,
officially.
someone showing to me that OpenAI doesn't even have an OpenAI agent, a ChatGPT agent in their own support. They have a
Yep,
decision tree chatbot. So is this
yep.
a bubble?
I still don't think so it's not a bubble because a bubble is something that's going to get to a point and then break, right? It's going to burst at some point. Just like the dot com and just like a lot of the other bubbles, the housing
Mm,
bubble in certain countries and whatnot. There's a breaking point. I think this is a evolutionary point where things are going to continue to evolve and continue to innovate. The only bubble that could happen here is going back to that copyright bubble. So you could say that that's a bubble, but again, it could create a bubble of a sense. Yet, so you have the New York Times saying, "I have 100 different things that say you guys at OpenAI have totally used our information. It is copyrighted."
mm,
And then them saying, "Hey, we tried to work with you," and whatnot. The issue there is if Sam Altman is saying, like he's saying now, and say, "Hey, we can't do it without copyrighted material." If that's what he said, then that's an interesting issue because of the fact of copyright, right? And it's one of those things like it becomes a national issue on some regards because if all these chipsets are being utilized for Gen AI, and then we have this world stage of like moving things around in this global economy, and then you have, you know, we can't really turn
Global
off AI
economy
at this
built on
point.
IP, by the way. Global economy built
Right.
on IP.
Yeah, it's built on IP, it's built on, like, the technology that's out there now and then currently being innovated, especially by, like, NVIDIA and some of these other groups, but you have this push not just from the technology now, you have the push from the government's trying to shore up their stuff. There's massive world stage of things happening with this IP, and so do you allow OpenAI? What is the administration's currently doing? Are they gonna allow this to happen because, it's a national it may be seen, as a national issue, or do they say, "No, let's find another way? Because there are other ways. I totally believe there's other ways to
Yeah.
do this, that they don't need to use copyrighted material,
That's
or if
just
they do, they
a
need to source it.
it's just really difficult to find to make this not a a gateway to everyone exploiting everyone else's IP. So
Right,
if you say this is okay, in some cases you're gonna have exploitation of that.
right.
I think this is actually the really big issue, and plus some other stuff. But this is one of the really big issues with generative AI in the future, right? Um, but you said it's not a bubble, but I think that I'd go so far as saying that the autonomous agents will be a bubble. I don't think it's ready for that. I think it's hallucinating too much, and I think hallucinations are, as Sam Altman said himself, a feature. And
Yeah,
I think
you're
that's
right,
going to
they
be an
are a
issue.
feature. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, when once you have grounding in place, and again, like, as these models still become more fine-tuned, and you have the grounding that touches it, or you have something that is, you know, revolving around that truth, or that source of truth, right? Then
Mm.
it's gonna get better because even grounding wise, you have it's like a 2% chance it's going to hallucinate, right? Everybody says hallucination, but like really, by itself, and if you prompt it in the wrong way, 100% is gonna hallucinate. You can make it hallucinate 100% of the time, or if you ground it and you learn how to nuance that. Because again, like, the way I see it is Gen AI is just an interface. The way I kinda the things that I talk about is like AI was like the data and the code and what was being developed on, especially back in the day with, like, the academics with math being, code of sense. Now we have
Yeah.
Gen AI where it's interface, and we're kind of interfacing with, like, the human language, just English,
I
essentially.
think, yeah, and I think that's cool. I love it as a microservice. I love it. I think the agents are a little bit. The problem is, like Andreas Wells said in the podcast early January here,
Right?
that you couldn't accept rounding errors in Excel. Imagine if your rounding function in Excel just hallucinated 0.5% of the time. It's not much,
Yeah. Yeah.
but what CFO would say? Oh, let's go with Excel.
Right, and this
Doesn't
is why
doesn't work
still
like
you
that.
need humans in the loop. I mean, there's still a lot of innovation going on around these
I
that
think it's a
you have to be
human
careful.
thing, right? I think it's a human technology. I think it needs humans. I
Yeah,
think
well,
it's centered around the human. It's a human demand. Everything it solves is based on human demand. That's why you
yes.
need to have some kind of human supply involved in it as well. I think so, actually. But
Yeah,
I'm not
well,
saying
and
it won't
then
work, it won't do things, but something.
right, and then how do we train the humans to make sure we can still do all that when there's when a lot of the let's say a lot of the focus, right? Just like we saw with automation again, we saw that people and companies saying, "Well, if we can automate it, then we don't need jobs." And this is like, again, I
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
blame like the
I think
classic.
that's the bubble, right? That is the bubble, I think. And
There's potentially a bubble there of is this real or not? Or is it going to take jobs? Yes, jobs are going to definitely change. Um,
but replacing your entire customer service center with generative AI agents, right?
that would be crazy,
Yeah, but when OpenAI has not even put it in their own chat support, right? Then I
right?
think
Oh,
we should consider some of this replace every human a bubble, I'd say. But let's see. Okay, let's see where it
yeah,
goes, right? Um, um, so let's move on from that notion, and then um, what I think is really really awesome with generative AI is how it's being used in automation in general as a microservice to some extent. I think it brings some completely new perspectives to that, especially because it is able to work with unstructured data. If you look at
yep,
40-year or something like the IT history, it's all been incremental improvements, marginal improvements on
right.
digital. data, maybe structuring more and then working with it. Also with RPA, digital structured data. So I think we have and I don't think it's been mentioned enough, but I think there is a complete paradigm shift here in us being able to work with unstructured data that is, to me, completely mind blowing. If you go back
Right.
2 years and you said, I can give you a tool that can fix unstructured for you, I'll be like over the moon. So are you?
Yeah.
And have you built processes on unstructured stuff with generative AI?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for unstructured is that we just need categorization, right? Categorization is going to help to understand what the data is, and then Gen AI has the ability to drive that understanding. It can take the nuance out of the data and say, "Hey, this is banking data. This is finance data. This is this type of finance data."
Mm,
So it can break it down to a certain level to say, now that data that was unstructured now has a structure. It may not be the perfect structure, but there's a start. Same thing as
yeah.
like why Gen AI has taken off is because before you're staring at a blank piece of paper and you're like, I have an idea. Well, it can give you some of that help. And then you then start driving from there and then say, okay, now my idea became into an actual physical idea versus just something that was in my head and I didn't have all the understanding and whatnot, or I didn't have the right words to use. And then now you just work with different groups and dial that in to see where it goes, right? So same thing with this is like taking this unstructured data, making it semi-structured, and then actually driving from there makes it so much easier because then you can actually say, "Hey, this autonomous agent can drive this function of it, and this one can do that." And eventually, we'll have them where they're combined. But that's again like the future. This is all an iterative step into the right direction, hopefully the right direction of where we're going.
Mm. But I think I said some time back that if you're using AI to increase entropy, you're doing it wrong, and I really like that quote by myself because I like
Interesting
the
thought,
idea.
right?
Yeah, because I think a lot of people are really fascinated with the chatbot thing where you can create new crap with it.
Right,
Just, you can make it. You can give it. Here's your structured data, and please write an email that's some
right.
crappy regurgitation of my structured data. But you can also use it the other way around to take the unstructured email that you're getting and structure it into something, give you a JSON output or
Yeah,
whatever, right? Give you structure out of it. And that's what
yeah.
I think is the most impressive to me is actually the other way around. Structure the old crap instead of generating the new crap.
Well, you can base it off of structure too. You can say, here's a template to go off of to give it more relevance, right?
Yeah, but I
The
get that.
other
But then you're still making it produce some of the unstructured stuff, right? Do you get my point? Write an email. That's
Yeah,
an unstructured communication, isn't it?
it can be. The one thing I see is coming up though too is that if we just use chatbots, right? If we just keep on this like chat interface that we've been dealing with, and OpenAI came with in 2022 and on November 30th, but then if that process stays, and then we have employees, if the goal is to have employees talking to this, what you're going to have is still very bad processes, very bad information potentially, and you're going to have people that are costing the company more money because they're just asking random questions. They're not actually asking pointed questions. So again, like, do we have the information? Can we tier our teams and our enterprise and our users to the right aspects of this? And how do we guide them? Because if we're just asking questions, that's going to be a high cost in the end. It's going then it'll hit a bubble, right? If we're just asking questions
Hmm.
and the people are costing the company tens of thousands of dollars a month extra just because of what they're doing or what they're writing, and they're just using it and they're recreating the wheel every time because they can, because they're helped, they're assisted, they're enabled, then there's a problem there. And that's going to cause the whole enterprise world and business to go, whoa, 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 maybe we're doing this wrong.
But that
And then
isn't
you
that
and then
isn't that the ChatGPT agent store, right? Isn't that exactly what you're just talking about?
I mean, this is still like an evolution of it, right? So you have the Chat GPT, and then you're chatting to it. You can ask it things. It can build you things. It doesn't have full on multimodality yet, but it's going to be interesting when it does. And these agents though have the ability to take on like a role. And when you have a
Yeah, but yeah,
role,
but yeah, yeah, but yeah. I mean, the agent store that we have right now, where you can see other people's GPTs that they built,
right?
right? The
Like
GPT store.
marketplace, yeah,
Yeah, and you don't know if that's the agent they built is better than the other one you already had,
you
the other one
don't,
out of box. You don't know anything. You have no clue if this is a
right?
good GPT or not.
Yeah,
But you can spend money on it. Start spending money on something.
yeah. Well, it's almost like the classic Google model too, because like you're in an app store that's not tested. None of these are tested. They're tested by
No,
people that create them. There are other people that spent the money to be a part of this human test area.
but
So
it seems like we're in this constant early access phase, right? And enterprise are looking for value, right?
yeah,
And
Yeah,
I
I
think,
mean,
there's a
in the norm.
fatigue around this early access crap, right? That all the
Uh,
things it
there
could
there's
be.
There's fatigue around all this, because of the amount of innovation coming out, and then and everybody's at a race to beat everybody else. I've been in meetings in San Francisco and talking to different AI founders and different people that are driving things, and their whole goal is to push the envelope as far as they can, as
Yeah.
fast as they can to be first to market. And it's some of that's dangerous, and some of it's just like, why would you want to do that? And but they want to get a name out for themselves. So
The
it's all
Snapchat thing,
very,
right?
yeah, it's very interesting, and it's skeptical. And some people, some of the startups are saying, no, we're doing enterprise work. And I'm like, you're not doing enterprise work. And like, yeah, but we have an API back in through like ServiceNow, and we're in the enterprise. I'm like, that's not enterprise, man. Like, that's dangerous. Like, you
Mm.
don't know what you're doing. You're literally injecting an LLM model into the backbone of your enterprise and saying, we're doing enterprise. That's not enterprise. Please stop.
Enterprise is, scaled, secure,
Right.
private, I think orchestrated. I think that's
The
4 words that come to
auditable, right?
mind.
It has to be able to be seen what's going
Yeah.
on, and if you don't have that, then you're not doing
Operable,
it.
yeah, maintainable, right? That's
Right,
super important.
and
And
who's doing it? Like, they don't know. A
yeah,
lot of still, enterprises are saying, "Who's going to drive this?" And then they say, "Well, we don't have the people internally, so let's go get a third party." And then these third parties are saying, "We have all the answers," and some do, some don't, and some are just a
to be
script kiddied version of somebody
yeah,
else's stuff.
but to be very, very frank, I think that, um, I think most of the things that we can do when we talk about talking to our data, is still something that needs a couple of years to mature, where we know where we want to talk to our data, and basically say, do we really want to talk to it? I think in some cases we do, and we're also building some cases in house where we are
Yeah,
talking to our data. So obviously we do, but I think the real value is when you just say, okay, we have an automation set up, and we are saying they can use generative AI technologies to enhance our automations. And that's where I don't know if you're going to
yeah,
go to the autonomous enterprise. So I've been
yeah.
nagging you on that, today. But I don't think that's what we're getting at. But I think just the sheer power of what we can now do in that regard is unparalleled, to what we've been doing for the last 20 years, at least in IT.
There's a lot of wins involving Gen AI into your automation, right? That's what I'm seeing, and even then, but again, going back to the data points, in there's just data driven development, data driven analytics. The data is key, but even in the automation world, you still see companies that never brought on business process mapping. They never
Mhm.
brought on a place to watch or to store or to understand where the process sits and where it goes. The same thing we're going to see with AI and Gen
Yeah,
AI is we're going to see if there's no mapping, if you don't know your processes in your company, that's your first issue, right? And this
yeah.
is where I see if everybody says AI is and Gen AI is the new silver bullet and we want the new shiny thing, back to like one of your talks, like, I don't know, 2 years ago now, it's like if once you're buying AI and Gen AI right off the shelf of Best Buy or something, then we have a whole different other issue. And the
Mhm.
aspect of that is driving back to where we say, hey, if you do that, then and you just don't have your information of your business and where it goes and what the processes are, then you need to roll back. And then if you roll back, then that goes back to it answers the question of where to start. And so when companies say, "Where do I start with Gen AI?" My answer would be, go understand your processes and then automate what you can of your core system so
Yeah.
you actually understand it all, and then go Gen AI, because you may actually be using those same automation systems and that team to drive this
Also
whole thing.
modernize your systems, right? That's why I usually
Right.
modernize, so you can get the Gen AI capabilities that are built into it through that, right?
Yeah, if
But
you have 30 different ERP systems and 20 different CRM systems, you have another issue completely, and you should not be bringing in Gen AI.
I actually I really love what you just did, Doug, because I think that's because that's how we started talking. I think a couple of years back is you heard me on I don't know, a podcast. I don't know which one it was,
Yeah, it
formulated
was
maybe.
the formulated automation or
Yeah, I
something like that, I
think I
believe.
think so. And
That's
where
a
I said
memory
that
pull. Oof.
you're not gonna be buying AI in
AI
your
on the shelf.
supermarket, or it's not.
Yeah.
And I also say it's not gonna be something that comes to, I don't know, Moses on Mount Sinai. But the funny thing is, now I don't know if it aged well,
Well,
because
yeah,
to some
because we
because some
changed
extent,
the acronym changed, so
but no, but it sort of did come on Mount Sinai. Ta-da! Here's GPT 3.5,
yeah,
right? I
but
remember
none of
that
us knew
moment.
that, right? None of us
No,
knew
no, but it
what the
feels like it just
transformers.
came like that to Moses, and now I was actually wrong, but I was not wrong, because what is the problem now? The problem is that the AI is sort of like, yeah, here it is, but you can only use it on the peak of Mount Sinai. You can't bring it
Right.
into your enterprise, right? That's the
Yeah.
challenges we're seeing right now. So it's not like it came down and said, "I'll fix your entire world," because you still have to understand what you're doing. Uh,
Yes.
Impact means you know what you're impacting, and if you don't know, if you don't know your process, you can't
Then you
automate it.
can't.
Just don't do it,
Right.
and you can't do that with generative AI either, right? Can't
Yeah. I
structure
mean
your
I
business
mean,
for you.
that's the classic thing, like, sometimes, yes, you can do an automate as is in the automation world, but you have to have a team that's actually watching it, monitoring it to make sure that is exactly what it needs to do. If in the
Mhm.
worst case scenario, you're not going to do generative AI as is,
No.
when it comes to a whole process because you're going to get a bunch of Chevy Tahoes being sold for a dollar because you're going to get prompt injections. You're going to have massive issues that you did not expect
Mm.
because you don't know the user group. If you the same reason like if you're speaking to an audience, you don't know who they are, you have to tailor that, right? But if you know who your audience is, you know where they're coming from, and you know what backgrounds they're coming from, you know what roles they play, you can speak to them on that level. The same thing that we do there as humans is what AI does and what Gen AI does. It understands the role, it tries to find that nuance of like who's the person I'm talking to, can I tell them how to do something? Or is it okay to tell them that if they cloned a T-Rex and walked down the street, is it okay? Like, no, it's not okay.
But still the positive casing, right, Doug? So it's still about saying we only work on this and that, and not work on anything but, right? We still need to do the things we did
Right.
with RPA, right? Saying only work on this, dear ChatGPT.
And so on that topic, that's where I say the autonomous enterprise and autonomous agents are going to come and play because it's where are humans being enabled and what are they gaining from this? So what are we getting from Gen AI? We're getting enablement, we're getting empowerment, we're getting the ability to do more. Same stuff we got with automation if it was done right is the fact that when things are going well, what we see is humans are really bad at documenting. We don't want to do it. We don't want to document what we do. We don't want to document what the other person's doing the team. But so if we don't document it, we still have five people in a team doing five different things to handle a process. But what if we had an autonomous agent that kind of helped us document our stuff? We have agents now jumping into meetings, or even some potentially sometimes jumping into podcasts to actually do the transcription, find out the top end items. What's the agenda? What's the action items? Right?
Mm.
What's the end result? Same thing could be happening in team meetings. Same things could be happening in team engagements. What if you have an autonomous agent there that is the project coordinator? Okay, great. So it's coordinating the aspects of taking the notes and putting it in and doing very regimented items so that they're in the right folders so that we can actually drive forward as humans to say, good, we know where we need to go next.
Okay, but okay. So let me take, because it's a funny conversation, because now it's become one of those where I take on a hat and you have another hat. So now I'm the
We
guy
wear many hats.
who's
It's okay.
yeah, but now I have the hat on where I'm attacking the autonomous enterprise here, right? So
Sure.
the point is, all the things you're mentioning there is something that's already a process that we're already doing. But the point is, whenever we get new technology, we want to do more, and it becomes more complex. The problem is that
Right.
complexity typically increases. It's like I'm a one-man firm. Now I say, okay, I've been really overworked. Now I hire 10 guys, so I'll get more time for myself. But the problem is now I have to manage the 10 guys, and it becomes even more complex. So the same thing, sort of, with technology. You get a
Yeah.
new tech, it becomes more complex. You've seen these
Right.
the napkins. Let's build this web app,
Yep.
but no one really needs that. Generative AI can build it quickly, but no one
Right.
needs that. If you'd shown it to me in '96, I'd be like, "Whoa, can I get a
Yeah.
web page this easily?" But in 2024, it's like, "Meh, could already do that some other place. I need something that's much more complex today." So my point is
Right.
that just going to want more complex stuff, and then we're not going to get to autonomous, because it's just going to fix the things that we already knew, the things of yesterday. Taking notes from your online meeting is going to be the thing we just say, "Oh, that's just
But I mean,
what I expect from my software," right? But we'll
right.
do something differently. That
But
means,
when things are more complex, you need more rigging, you need more information, you need more like where's the data coming from? You need more audit. You need all that, right? So if it's
mm,
more complex, you need to be able to know where it came from, why it came from there, and where it's and that tells where it's going. And so I think that that's where again the autonomous agent will be able to help drive some of the nuance, drive some of the simple stuff that we don't want to do, and kind
yeah,
of keep track of that.
that doesn't make it an autonomous enterprise, does it?
No, that's a part of it. So the
Ah,
autonomous enterprise is a massive thing, right? And
yeah.
so you have agents, you have IoT that's coming back
But
in,
I
you
get the
have
automation thing, right? We've been automating things for forever. IT is about automating data. It is at its
true.
core
At its
about automating
core,
data. Yeah, and
100%.
no one said, and that's also the problem with all these RPA programs where you're still
Right.
measuring how much value they generated. No one's measuring how much value your ERP has generated over its lifetime, because it's also an automation of a process. We just
Makes
forgot
sense, yeah.
about it. Just became a thing we just
We just
thought
do.
was inherent. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's inherent to how we work. And that's
right.
the thing I'm saying, is that if we can now with fix everything digital, I
Mhm.
think that the complexity might just, and this is just maybe me musing here, philosophizing a little
No,
bit,
it's fine.
might become more analog, right? Like I think I said it in a post some months back, that we'll be buying vinyl in an age of streaming. We'll be we'll be
Well,
wanting that extra touch, which can't be fixed. Will That will be the
but
complexity.
again, that's the human aspect of it. That's not a technology aspect. That's a human change aspect. So
But can you
history,
separate the two? Can you separate the two in 2024?
you 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 can't because 'cause they're
Ooh,
synonymous because, again, like, we're humans. We have a day job, we have a business stuff that we do, and then we
yeah.
have our personal lives, and, so this is where I say that people where technology comes in, innovation comes in, and you have this like power struggle that happens because you see power. But then when you look at history, and history is not just understanding what happened in the past. History is understanding what happened, what changed. Like how
Mm,
did humans deal with change is the study of history. So
mm,
when we're looking now, and we're saying there's change happening. There's massive change on a global scale. Generative AI is one of those massive players, or trees in the forest that may fall or not. That's when you say, okay, here's the future of that, and here's where we're going with that, and here's the why. But when humans are pushed in an innovation state, they push back. And the way they push back is they say, okay, when I'm offline, when I'm home and I'm personally putting time in, what do I want to get back to? And sometimes it's creature comfort. Sometimes it's, hey, I remember hearing, I'm so tired of this music being created by AI. I just want to hear something that a human made
mm.
on a record, and that's going to make me have joy, right? So what does that look like? Or I'm going to spend more time with my family because of these aspects, or we're going to get back to the forest and stuff because we're going to get back to nature. That all those things can are going to happen, and we're going to see a change in the future of how people and how humans act because of these changes that are happening in the business realm, and it is going to be more complex. And when things are more complex, you find that people need to like meditate or calm down a little bit or just get away from it because we're biomechanical machines. Like, we're just biology. We're cells that work like computers. We seem to act like computers because we're building things in our own image, and we're building these things that mimic our brains and mimic how we interact. But we can't keep up with them. We have to, sleep, right? That is the enemy. The enemy is
Yeah, but
time and
at the
sleep.
same time, you had Jeff Bezos on Lex Friedman, I think, where he said that the human brain is still so much more efficient,
It
so
is.
much
I
more
mean, if you think
efficient.
about it, like we eat food and we keep going. We're the most efficient thing
I
that's ever been
haven't read
created.
the entire Wikipedia, right? But I can make a decision faster and easier than entire ChatGPT, right?
Yes, but I also think that's why I built a governance model that I would love
Yeah.
to get out there, which is because the issue with the ChatGPT and these autonomous agents right now is they don't ask three fundamental questions. The issue I see that's coming up is I don't want to be talking to a potential AGI that's coming out in the next whoever knows when, because things are moving so fast, that I ask it a question and say, what's the meaning of life? And it tells me 42, and I say, how in the heck did you get there? And it says, it's just 42. But I built a governance model that says, like, no, 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 every question I ask you, especially if it's a pertinent question, should go through three layers. It should go through like
Mm.
the id, ego, super ego, just like our brains do. And then I need to see what your thought process
Yeah,
was,
yeah,
so
yeah.
I can
That's how
understand
we're
what the heck
building
that
it.
is.
Yeah, yeah. Orchestrating them and having audit trails on what they're doing.
Right.
That's also this. That's the same way we're building it
I think that's the
when we're doing it.
most massively important thing is to
Yeah.
know why did it get there, how did it get there, what was the
But
thought
that's
process.
actually one of the most complex orchestrations I've ever done, because
Right.
they hallucinate, because they're not strict. So having them reply to each other and having this,
Yeah.
making a meeting of generative AI agents is actually
Yeah.
difficult
Yeah.
because they
Watching
are
watching the
so.
things where they talk is great. So
but but I think that it also gets a little bit to something I spoke to a friend of just the other day, is that
yeah.
I think it's the simplicity of the 2015 world was that there was a distinction between business and IT, and there was a distinction between human and IT to some extent. Still had that. I think it is getting blurry. I think it's all
Well,
mixing up together right now, right?
yeah.
And that also means that you can't just say let's just create more efficiency to create more efficiency anymore. We need to think about what we're doing with, because every human being is touched by tech all the time.
right.
right today,
It need to be
and
purposeful, right?
yeah, but also yeah, but what should you know your customers, some of the most important people. I said this also to Maria last week. Some of the most
Right.
important people for your enterprise. You should just automate every interaction with them through a chatbot? Is that the point? What what
Yeah, it doesn't mean
when
you're
we
gonna
have
answer the
tech that
questions, yeah.
when automation power is now getting close to something that has universal application possibilities, doesn't this mean that we should stop to just maybe desperately automate everything and start to think about a little bit more and more closely about the why?
Yeah, I mean, we should, and I still think that goes back to humans, the way we do things. When we even just looking at the history of my history of like the United States, because that's where I come from, so that's the
Mhm,
history I understand more than anything. Is because when we when you go from like World War II, for example, and that horribleness of that, and then you have the '60s and '70s where humans and people, especially here in the United States, were like, no, no, free, free love and like different ideals and like getting back to trying to find a core, trying to be enlightened, trying to do that because everybody rebels against the generation before. It's just a human aspect, right? So we try to change how that looks, and then we go through the aspects, but there's definitely going to be a lot of that, and we don't know what that looks like because humans are humans. We do kind of do what we want to do in that aspect. But when it comes down to you were saying about technology and how it's going to change. Actually, I forget what I was going to say there. But either way, humans are interesting things,
no, but
and
let me
we
just see
have
if I
to
can get you
abide by
back
that.
on the track again with that one. It is early in the morning for you, as I said in the beginning.
Yeah,
But the point is that I've always said I'm actually an educated historian, so I have a master's degree in history, some early modern stuff. Not going to get into that, but I've always said that what I see as the big crime, apart from the obvious crimes of Second World War, was that
right.
every side, both sides, all the
Yep,
sides treated humans as a replaceable part. Every human was just a replaceable part in a war. You could
right.
just put them in, they died, didn't care. You just D-Day,
Yeah,
just flood a couple of thousands, many thousand people just on a beach and let them
yep,
die. Let's just
yep.
bomb Dresden. Let's just the Russian way of just putting up people as a human
Massive
wall.
walls of people. Yeah,
Yeah, but it's just replaceable parts. And my fear is that if we don't start thinking about ethics also when every human is touched by technology all the time, uh, then
yeah.
we might end up in a situation where humans will become not a replaceable part, but a digit, right?
Well,
That's all just as bad. That's just as dangerous, actually.
yeah. I mean, aren't we seeing that with the social media
Yeah,
crisis? Right.
yeah,
We all somehow obliged and kind of give into this and said, well, it's okay that teenagers and people that are using social media too early are committing suicide. Somehow
mm,
this is not. And we should, ideally, as a society, if we were able to all talk to each other, we have the internet, we have everything else, but like we should have a way to voice. We don't agree with that.
no,
There's a reason why I don't give my kids cell phones because I don't want them on there yet. They're too young. But what is too young? And are we
yeah,
mentally stable enough as humans to deal with some of the stuff? Because the social media side of this is gamifying our brain. It's working
mm,
against us to get us the doom scroll and to get us all these things. And so is AI gonna go the same way? Is Gen AI
yeah.
going to gamify us? And that's the
Well, it
part that's
will, right?
scary.
There's multiple studies showing that even though you keep your sanity or your narrative self saying that I'm always critical of whatever AI suggests to me, ChatGPT suggests to me. There's multiple studies showing that you are affected by whatever it suggests, even though you
100%.
say you are not.
That's the
You
way
you
it
will
says it.
be. Yeah, that's the way we
Yeah,
work as humans. We always we are so empathetic beings that we always
yep.
see whatever the counterpart is saying. Maybe they're right, and that we also do that with AI, right? Because
There's
it
a
looks like a
possibility,
human,
yeah.
sounds like a human, right? So there's
Yeah,
something we need to look about. How do you feel about AI ethics in general, Jeff? Is it sounds it's difficult to talk about. Like I spoke to Maria about last
yeah.
week. She also that it's difficult to talk about AI ethics because people don't want to talk about ethics. So you sort of have to make a new word for it. But she thinks that we need an ethics case to complement the business case, right? Do you agree with that?
Well, that's kinda how anything works. You need a case, you need something to show, whether it's like the trial experiment or, that how do you I have a horrible example, but it's like, especially here in the United States, it's how do you get a stop sign put onto a four-way stop? You don't get a stop sign because you need it. You get a stop sign because somebody potentially lost their
Yeah,
life and it's a horrible accident. And you say, "This is why we need a stop sign here, everybody."
Yeah.
So that's the same thing with ethics, and this is
We
why
don't
we
want to
are
get to there, right? We don't
we
want to
don't
get
want
to
to get
that
there,
point.
right?
No.
How do we because Gen AI has such a big pool. If it does, if it's enabled to an extent of an enterprise, or it's enabled to an extent of a world government, for example, like what is it going to do? Like, are they however the humans use it, however they define it, whatever they define is a target, not a target, or is a goal to hit on their fiscal year. That all depends, and it's
Yeah.
not the AI's fault. It's not the it's the human's fault.
I really love that stop sign analogy. I really think that's brilliant. That's really
It's a
perfect.
horrible one, but it works.
No, but it's a really good one because that's exactly what we. So many people are seeing that. Okay, this is a really dangerous crossing, right? We
Yeah, it
a
is,
lot of people
and
also seeing that.
yeah,
Right? Some people are overdoing it. I think. I don't. As I don't
yeah,
believe in the autonomous thing, I don't think we're up for replacement, but we're up for manipulation. Definitely, I really believe we are, and we're already
yeah.
being manipulated in so many ways, right? And it's about time we start talking about putting up a stop sign somewhere, right?
Well, part of the autonomous enterprise is not replacing people. Like I will
No.
never replace people. My thing with anything, the same way I do with my automation work is I believe in it's don't fire, just not hire. So essentially, you're going to keep the
Yeah.
same workers. You're going to enable them to do more and more and more. We're going to get more complex work. You don't need to hire as many people. So you don't need to be like the Googles and Microsoft and hire 10,000 people and then let them go in 90 days.
No.
You can actually just say, we're going to enable our people to do more. We're going to give them what's needed. We don't need to hire people just to hire people. We're hiring people for the right reasons
Yeah.
and then the right stuff. Where, if somebody in your management group says, we need to come hire 10 people because we need to do this thing, your first question to the rest of the leadership should say, go talk to our automation team or our Gen AI team because we should find a way to actually make this not 10 people, like 2 people.
Mm.
And we find the 2 best people.
Yeah. I agree with so much of what you just said, and I think it's this has been a really great conversation, Doug. I think brilliant insights. Love the stop sign. Gonna keep thinking about that one.
Yeah.
And then
I, I know I was hearing Wayne Butterfield's interview that you did with him, and that was very interesting. And I know one of the things that was brought up was like the printing press and how Gen AI has kind of provided that kind of insight. And then I've heard also Gen AI being like referred to as like the electricity of our time.
yeah,
And although I agree on a lot of extents because Gen AI has been able to show it can do with a printing press. Gen AI has been shown it can almost create a stir like electricity did. But I
mm,
think now that we're seeing kind of where it's going, I think we have to roll back and say, really, Gen AI is the first time this is going to impact us as a civilization. It's going to impact us culturally. It's going to impact so many different aspects of our lives, and it already has, and it's continuing to show that it's going to. I believe it's the first instance of when language was created before countries, before civilization, when we had tribes of people, because we kind of are in a sense going back to that because we have different city states and countries and everything else. This is language, right? This is the like literacy. It's like the ability to tell stories, the ability to really build in like guides and how tos and tell the story and tell like the history of things, and then we get into the culture and the civilizations, right? So I think Gen AI and this newfound transformers and the way that it's working, and maybe and again, it's not going to continue to stay Gen AI. It's going to evolve into other things. It's going to get better. The same reason why I was saying like AI in general is like the data and the development code. Gen AI is showing that it's the interface of all things. We're interfacing with it in multi different ways, telling
mm,
stories, doing math problems, doing all this stuff. It's getting better and better as it iterates. But then the future of a potential future, right, of AGI, if and when that hits, that's going to be the operating system. When that becomes
mm.
the operating system, it's going to involve Gen AI as the interface. It's going to involve AI as the code. But then everything that's being coded is and that's being worked is either done through like a language or a written language or the English language or just speech and everything else that we're seeing right now because you can talk to it and whatnot and it
But
understands
then
all
it
that.
is like electricity, isn't it, Doug?
Right, but I mean, it isn't like it is like it all kind of fits. Like the printing press does fit, electricity does fit, the internet fits for an analogy, but really, it's going to impact us. Without literacy, without the written language. we wouldn't have any of those innovations. This is a whole new form of innovation that's going to
Yeah, yeah.
drive, and that's why I say it helps.
But that's
The
why
only
I said
reason
it
we
earlier. It's a very human innovation. It's a very human technology because it's built on the
because it
most
tells
human stuff
stories,
thing.
right? You
Built
can
on
tell stories, it helps people to
built
tell
on
stories.
language, the most human thing, right?
Yeah,
Um, so, but I continue to be both overwhelmed or completely
yeah,
enthusiastic about some parts of this technology, and also underwhelmed by some of the hype that I think is over the edge. And I think the problem is that the hype has sort of taken over so much of the playing field that people are not seeing all the real benefits that are actually tangible. That
well,
makes me sad. And they also
yeah,
so many tangible, controllable use cases, right? That people don't
yeah.
see before all the hype. I don't like
But
that.
hype comes with any new technology, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
there has to be there's that, the innovators and the people pushing for the hype and saying, "This is the next big thing." Look at VR, right? So VR
Mm,
came in, Meta, I mean, heck, Facebook changed their name to Meta so they can
mm.
drive this whole new branch, and although I see tons of value in VR, it hasn't jumped the crevice yet. Like, it's still kind of, like, on the innovation side, and still early
It
adopters are on
it
it, and
hasn't
there's
helped
wins there.
either that the all of the metaverse budgets were just pushed into generative AI, right? But I also think
Right.
that IoT metaverse is something that's going to happen. It's a societal thing that's going to happen. As I said before, the boundaries between
Sure,
tech
yeah.
and humans are already blurred. I think that's the
Yeah.
metaverse, and I also think that it doesn't need goggles. I don't think it needs
Right.
goggles, the metaverse, but
How
that's
do how
just
do
me.
how do we
Now,
get away from that, right?
yeah, yeah, and I
So
also think that IoT people are like, oh, that's underwhelming. It's a fad. It's done. I don't think it's done. I think it's just going to grow even more now, right? It's just sometimes takes time for things to mature enough to figure out what we're going to do with it. And I think that the problem is that some companies have a tendency or an interest in keeping the hype train going on generative AI,
yeah. Well, there's
and
money
that
there,
and
so
yeah, but it keeps making it a little bit more and more. I don't know, over the edge, right? So
yeah,
I
I mean,
think,
well, it goes back to, like, proposed power. If there's proposed power,
yeah,
then there's the
yeah,
primacy there. Somebody's gonna wanna win,
yeah,
and yeah, as we see all these technologies are broken apart, we see just what you're saying, and this is why I say with autonomous enterprise, IoT comes back in, DevOps comes back in,
yeah.
we have edge computing that comes back in, but then, like, all of that becomes part of the autonomous enterprise. It doesn't it but it still is not replacing people. It's driving different aspects. So now you have your Gen AI has the ability to talk to all these IoT devices, and we saw with, like, CES, like, tons of IoT devices are coming out, and so they're all producing data. Well, how do we ground that data? How do we leverage that data? Well, we have Gen AI and work with some of these indexing and whatnot,
Mm,
pull these data in for different sets. There's your grounding. Now you have that data. Then you categorize it. Now you actually do data driven development, data driven analysis, and boom, you have all the information you need. And that's what's going to be driving the autonomous enterprise is that all this stuff is being interconnected. And that's that.
mm.
And I guess the only going back to the bubble thing, the only thing that could make that a bubble is when companies push the envelope to get to that edge and they go too fast, too hard, too much, and they realize they're still the guys that don't have like business process mapping. They're still the guys that don't understand where the processes are coming from, who's talking where, and they have no way to talk to their employment user
My
groups
fear
to
is
say,
that people have been spending tons of money on doing some premature consulting work or in 2023 and getting no
yeah.
value from it, and then saying, "Oh, we're stopping the generative AI in an investment right now for now,"
Well,
and
we,
because
s- yeah.
that would be really sad because there's real value to get.
We saw that with automation too, right? So
Yeah,
you go
yeah.
through these teams and people and these companies go through one automation group and they say, hey, this third party's doing it for us, and they were using like automation anywhere, and then they go, well, that didn't work, even though
Oh,
it,
but
it does.
there you had someone to imitate, right? You had banking and insurance companies big that have been
Right,
doing it for years, right? You had someone to imitate, and where you saw they had value. There were some stories of value. Here, you're like, we have no
right,
stories of value. We have no stories of scale. We have no one to imitate. We don't. We. It's all about us creating. This is some. I'm just
yeah,
afraid that some companies will have moved too fast,
yes.
too quickly, right? And getting no value from it, and then being like left in that throw of disillusionment, right? Isn't that
Right.
possible?
Or what if they multi-platform, right? So they're saying like, "Oh, well, this part of the company in this region is using OpenAI, but this one over here is using Claude, and this one over here is using
Mm,
Minstrel." Great. Well, what are you really doing, guys? Like,
mm.
maybe you should focus on the one thing. The same thing happened in automation. The same thing is going to happen in Gen AI. You're going to have different organizations using different models because, again, like there's a nuance there that people just want to do what they want to do, and they're missing the fact that they should all be one connective unit, one connective culture of a company because companies that don't recognize their culture, or companies that you have leadership that are trying to browbeat culture into the company, are doing it the wrong way. The culture comes from the people. This is why we say technology and automation and Gen AI are going to be about people, because if
Yeah.
you don't have the people on board, they're not going to be a part of it. And if they buck the system or they don't want to be a part of it, you're going to see a huge, issue there where you're not being addressing like the right thing in the room.
So, Doug, I think this has been a great conversation. I love the way I feel that you wrote to me just before the conversation that you want to break all the records, and I remember speaking to Wayne Butterfield that he now had the record. So I love that this is becoming a thing to sort of break the length record on these episodes,
As long as there's
and you
value of what we're
managed.
talking about, yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
but there is, but you managed to. I was rounding it off. I don't know, 10 minutes ago, and you sort of just let's keep pushing. I love that. So
But
no,
I
but I
could talk
think
for hours about everything.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
there's
yeah,
still so
definitely.
many things we didn't jump into, but yeah,
I think it's been a brilliant conversation. I really loved so many of your insights, and also the way we sort of got around
yeah,
the edge of it. So not just dive into the things you usually say, but also maybe challenging it a little bit more. I think we've got some really interesting insights and with some experience perspectives on it that I really enjoy a lot.
yep,
Um, but this also brings me to the final question, Doug.
sure. Oh, yeah.
What is the only constant?
The only constant is essentially, I mean, everybody, I think we've all agreed that they change, but I think the only constant, I'm going to flip it because it makes more sense, and it helps people out to understand. The only constant is actually failure. The only constant is to continue to, it's failure, it's perseverance, it's understanding the patience of failure, and the reason why that's the only constant is because that's the only way to really learn and grow as a person, and even as a business. Because if you embrace failure and you live in brave spaces and not safe spaces, those brave spaces are going to be able to drive you much beyond what you already thought you could. They're going to drive your teams to be more brave because they understand that they're being supported by not just themselves. They're not worried about, missing the step or not being perfect. The only constant is failure and perseverance, because you have to push past the failure, and you have to have patience with your people and make sure they understand that they're on the same journey. And if you do it together, that's the win. So you can say it's change, or you can say it's the journey, and the human dilemma of that journey is understanding that we're all different, we all come from different backgrounds, and the drive and the perseverance of that's the only constant, because that's the constant that should be there.
That's a really great answer, Doug. Thank
Great.
you for that, and thank you for being on the only constant.
Appreciate it, Lasse.
You've listened to The Only Constant, a podcast sponsored by Basico.